Productivity, quite the hot topic on YouTube nowadays, at least on my feed. And I've spent my fair share of time watching these videos, usually when I want to be productive, ironically. But I want to get stuff done as much as the next guy, so I've tried a lot of these tips out myself. And of all the ones I've implemented so far, there really has only been one that I've stuck with and has really helped me out, which is using a calendar. Well, technically it's called time blocking or time boxing, but I like to just call it using a calendar because it's pretty much what it is. It's a really simple concept where you set aside a certain amount of time where you only work on one task. So from 8 to 9 a.m. you do this thing, and then from 10:30 to noon you do this thing. I think the big reason people reject this method at first is because it's the same one we use in school and at work. Our classes are broken up into hour or so time blocks, and we punch in and out of work for our shift, which is also a big time block. But there's a good reason that these things are structured this way, mainly because of Parkinson's law, which is the old adage that work tends to expand to fill the time allotted to it. When we allot 90 minutes to a task, we get 90 minutes worth of work done on it, ideally. Another reason is that it tells our brain we are focusing on this one thing for this amount of time, whether we like it or not, which helps eliminate distractions and stay focused. Let's compare time blocking to another traditional productivity method, the to-do list. You write things down on a piece of paper or an app you want to get done, and you plan on doing them eventually. Weeks or months can go by and our to-do list items are just sitting there, collecting dust. And the thing is, even when you start working on your to-do list, there's usually not much clarity on what things to do first, and your brain can quickly get scrambled just looking at the list and trying to figure out where to start. The solution? Use a calendar. Take your to-do list items and assign them a time block. This gives you a deadline, which is great for fighting procrastination, and most importantly, doesn't require much thinking when the time actually comes. The thinking is done when you make the time block. You can plan when you do it around business hours, location, and other things that will make it more efficient. So I'm not saying get rid of your to-do list, but what I am saying is use it with a calendar. Once you start using a calendar consistently, you get to really see where your time is going, which in my opinion is the biggest benefit of using one. The analogy I like to use is a food journal. Scientific studies have shown that people who maintain a consistent food journal lose twice as much weight as people who don't. And that's because the truth is most people have no idea what they eat in a day, let alone their calories and macronutrients. And unfortunately, the same is true about our time. Most people have no idea where their time is going, which is why looking at our screen time can be so shocking.
6 hours? I was on my phone for 6 hours? What the fuck did I do?
And this is quite scary because time is the most valuable and finite resource we have. So obtaining a clear view of where it's going should be a high priority. An interesting thing I found since I started blocking out time slots is that I find myself glancing at the time subconsciously whenever I'm distracted or lost. Because I typically start my time blocks on the hour or half hour, it's almost like I've conditioned myself that I will start something on these time intervals. This has created mini deadlines throughout my day so that even when I do inevitably get distracted, I give myself until the top of the hour or half hour to get back on track. Here are some tips that I would give myself if I were just starting to use a calendar today. The biggest one is to make sure your calendar reflects what you actually did, not what you planned to do. So if you planned to watch a Photoshop tutorial on YouTube and work on a new design, but you ended up down a YouTube rabbit hole for 2 hours, write that down on your calendar. Be brutally honest with how you're spending your time so you can accurately assess it later. The second tip is don't plan your days out in advance too much, at least not at first. This might sound counterintuitive and it doesn't apply to everyone, but if you're just starting out, I don't think planning your day in 5-minute increments is going to be helpful. With the exception of appointments, my work schedule, or other things that are set in stone, I actually leave my day open for the most part and then fill them in as I see fit on the day of. With the exception of the first time block of the day, which is the most crucial because it's when my mind is the freshest. Until you know that you can execute your plan, I wouldn't get too excessive with planning it out in advance. This is an area I'm still trying to work on, and hopefully I can get better at sticking to a tighter schedule and having more foresight. Like any skill or habit, time blocking takes practice and self-awareness to do it well, so don't skip to level 99 when you haven't passed level 1. The process of consistent planning is more important than the plan itself. To quote Dwight D. Eisenhower, plans are nothing, planning is everything. And this pairs with a third tip, which is to allot more time than you think you should. Because one thing I found that I think a lot of people can agree with is most tasks take longer than you think they're going to. I'm just gonna run to the grocery store, stop at the post office, and get some dog food at the pet store. It should take me 30 minutes. But then you hit a bunch of traffic, the line at the post office is super long, and your dog takes a dump on the floor of PetSmart. And that's okay, but just make sure you adjust your calendar to accurately reflect the time it took. By doing this consistently, you can start developing a truer sense of how long things take, which makes it easier to make time blocks in the future. Tip number 4 is to block off leisure time. You might want to try and block every minute of your day to being productive at first, but this just isn't realistic. If you want to stay productive long term, you're going to have to give yourself some time to recuperate, so be sure to set aside time to watch a movie, or hang out with friends and family. Just like athletes can injure themselves by not doing enough recovery, you can hurt your brain by not giving it a chance to decompress and rest. So put that bath bomb in your closet to good use and relax for a little bit. Tip 5 is to set goals with time and not numbers. So what I mean by this is, instead of saying I'm going to read 20 pages a day, say I'm going to read for 30 minutes a day. Now, some people probably won't agree with me on this, but the way I see it is that we typically get better at things with time, so the same time block will become more productive the more you do it. As our skills and ability to focus improves, so does our output per unit time. For instance, when I started editing videos, it took me several hours just to figure out how to use Premiere Pro, and my first couple of videos took me a really long time to make. Now that I'm more familiar with how the program works and have a little bit of experience, I'm able to get a lot more editing done in the same amount of time. And I plan to get even better at it the more I practice. And back to the reading example, reading speeds and comprehension can also increase up to a point. So that same 30 minutes a day of reading might mean you can read more pages as you become a more efficient reader. Also, some portions of books are denser than others. Some days might be off days where you aren't as focused and read less. Of course, this comes down to personal preference and it doesn't apply to everything, but in my experience, the arbitrary number goals haven't really worked as well for me long term, with the exception of physical things like fitness. So now for a few technical features that I find helpful. You can click to create a 1-hour time block or drag to make a smaller one. You can go as low as 15 minutes. You can also drag existing time blocks to extend or shrink them, which I do a lot. You can have your calendar send you a daily briefing in the morning of what your schedule for the day looks like. And one I just found out about recently that I think is pretty cool, you can use a calendar totalizer tool to keep track of the total amount of time you spend on different things. I use googlecalendarhours.com, which is a free open source website that uses your Google Calendar API to get a total of the time that you spend on the time blocks that you've set. You can filter by month or year and see your time blocks ranked by date or by total. You just have to make sure that the time blocks all have the same exact label. For example, these jiu-jitsu classes were counted as 2 separate totals at first until I made all the names the same, and it is case sensitive. I use this feature to keep track of my work hours, sleep hours, and time spent training in martial arts, which I use to fill out my 10,000 hours poster. This poster has 10,000 squares on it that I fill in each time I complete 1 hour practice of training in a martial art. And it's a really cool tool for visually tracking progress and provides a daily dose of motivation. If you find it interesting, you can pick one up for yourself down in the description below. In conclusion, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Time blocking is the tried and true productivity method used by billionaires, doctors, schools, and all kinds of productive people. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here, so I would highly recommend building a habit of using a calendar consistently if you're serious about being productive and getting things done. I'm still experimenting with this method, but I plan to use it for the rest of my life and keep tweaking it along the way. Have you ever used time blocking? Do you have any tips for us? Let us know in the comments below. See you in the next one. Peace. You can